Beyond the grip of the familiar, a threshold demands to be crossed. The mortal shells yearn for meaning, awaiting a glimpse of their true purpose. These 4 lines are at the start of Mortal Shell, and they give us a fair bit to think about as we play. The game's title, Mortal Shell, can also be said as this: a being that has the possibility of experiencing death, who is also a shell of who they once were. And that makes a lot of sense. Our character is called by many names: Foundling, Unborn, Aberration, and an Empty Vessel. A foundling is described as a baby with parents who left them at birth and given to others to be taken care of. Very similar to an orphan, except as an orphan, that specifically means your parents passed away. But this can be interpreted in a different way. We are without a background. The shells we awaken, the NPCs we meet, they all have backstories and history. We as the Foundling just show up with no real reason why. A Foundling, while being a person with no present guardian in their life, I feel within the context of the game, it's a person with no ties to anyone. A Foundling doesn't know their past and why they are there or what created them. Just like the character we play, we're just a person without meaning looking for a purpose. I think what solidifies this is the secret ending. While a bit comical in nature, it's still something we should question. Within Fallgrim, there's an NPC called Baghead, very similar looking to all the brigands we see in the game, except this one isn't hostile to us. He doesn't do much other than ask if you have rat and moonshine, but after giving him both items, he offers you a chance to be friends forever and hang out a bit more. Once accepted, music plays while footage of Fallgrim plays in the background. As a Foundling, we don't have a purpose yet, as we haven't found one, so who says we can't sit and relax for eternity with a friend by our side, drinking moonshine and eating rats till the day we die? I understand this may be passed off as a joke ending by the devs for comedic relief, so I propose an alternative. One of the biggest mysteries in this game is the intro. We as the Foundling awaken some other plane of existence covered in water and mist. Immediately after, we are then taught various things like hardening and typical combat, and then face off against Hattern, a being who only appears in this plane of existence and nowhere else. The only info we get on him is an etching in the beginning of the game, which talks about Hattern giving gifts to the people and how they were wasted on them, as these people are creatures now and are twisted and malformed. There's not a whole lot of information on this Hattern fella, but I've come up with 2 ideas. Either Hattern was a citizen of some high standing and has since passed away, but before he did, he passed on some gifts to the people of Fallgrim, or he's a spiritual being who could be considered a god and now has an agenda he wants fulfilled, which is where you come in. I'm going to go with the latter on this idea, as waking up in this plane of existence, fighting this person we don't even know, and then him sending us off on our way is just all really weird. On top of this, he's also watching over us all the time. Every time you leave this plane, you leave by being swallowed by a giant wormfish. Well, this also happens at the end of the game. If you die to the Unchained, you immediately start back at the beginning of the fight, and are given an option to leave or not. If you do, then the fish comes by and swallows you, the same exact fish that almost swallows you up when Hattern's nearby. Hattern also forces us to fight and defeat him before acquiring new weapons, almost like he's testing us, and once we meet his expectations, he knows we're ready for what lies ahead. Regardless, I think this is likely the reason we are the way we are. Something unexpected occurred thanks to Hattern maybe having some involvement, and because of this, we aren't really liked, as we aren't normal and don't fit the beliefs of the current religions. Brother Corvid of the Seed of Infinity even scolds us when arriving in our Foundling form, saying that his fellow brothers hate us because of the sins of our fathers. It's unclear specifically what he's talking about, but it does have to do with the past generations of us before we arrived, and their actions which likely caused them to hate us. And those actions are likely a result we are seeing now. Because after being sent from Hattern's place, we arrive in Fallgrim, a dark, decrepit swamp full of rotting soldiers and warriors. But it wasn't always like this. See, Fallgrim used to be a thriving kingdom. Like most kingdoms, it had a large populace, all with different social classes, usually based on wealth, all of which contributed to the thriving of the kingdom in some way. Kingdoms also have religions. Regardless of what religion you subscribe to, most contain a higher being considered a god. And in Fallgrim, gods are also named the Revered. There are a few of these revered folk within the game, and we'll get to them shortly, but these revered left gifts called Nectar. Nectar is a fraction of the revered, transcendent nature basically manifested into a physical form. These were seen as special since they came from the revered themselves. They must be significant in some way. This tar was also found out to be very practical. The people at the Seed of the Infinity would use nectar for their rituals, and the remains of this nectar, which they would usually discard, were found out to actually be really good for the lesser devout, as they would sell these off, and the lesser devout would use them for healing wounds and relieving maladies. Drinking this would transform people. It would make them feel closer to the revered with every sip they took, but almost like it was a hallucination, and we would see these effects in full thanks to Teal.
With the tar throbbing in my belly, I see her completely. Each movement creates a swarm of copies. They ripple out from her, following their own whims. Some collide and join together, while others split apart, forming new copies. A reflection of reflections spreading out from her. 2 winters. That is all the physician promised was left for me. The malady gnaws at the corners of my eyes. Pries the flesh from fingers and toes. It burrows deeper and deeper into my bones with each passing day.
Teal was so hell-bent on consuming tar that after consuming enough, these maladies from drinking the tar decayed his flesh and bone, making him unrecognizable to his kin. In an attempt to get help, he went to the Seat of Infinity, where upon arriving, he was delirious. These people who were waiting for him were the brothers and sisters of the Order, and we get to meet one of them at Fallgrim Tower, Sester Genessa. Sester Genessa, a woman we have never met before, already gave us a name and helps us in our purposes. She keeps our flesh safe when we die so we can reincarnate and continue our journey. But as we stated before, the brothers hated our past generations, so wouldn't the Sesters hate us too, as they're all part of the Order? Well, maybe, but let's come back to that. Up the stairs of the tower is a bird-like creature, confined and imprisoned, held together by rubble and chain, as well as a tarnished seal that was used to chain the prisoner in tightly. His name is the Old Prisoner, and he thanks you for helping him, as no one has attempted to help him for a very long time. The Old Prisoner says that if you can retrieve the glands of the revered, that this would be enough to heal him. When meeting him in a foundling form, he decides to share a little bit of a secret with us. Sester Genessa was your typical Sester, serving the revered and yearning for immortality, but she did it. She is immortal. Her body, so to speak, was shattered and reconfigured, but now has made it to the other side. She got what she wanted, to become immortal, except now she's cursed eternally to observe and watch as the days go by, but she achieved her goal. This is why she can save us when we die and is in every place in the game at one time. She's the immortal observer. This is her job. I bring this up as this is extremely important. These Sesters and brothers, and even the lesser devout in the other areas of the kingdom, all worship these revered, not only to become closer with them and feel a more spiritual connection between them and their revered God, but to also ascend from this world and become immortal. When you die in mortal shell, a quote comes up that reads, Mors finis non est, which means death is not the end of life, but its continuation. A call to life after death, being reborn, and immortality, all themes that occur throughout the whole game. And that specifically is the driving force for the Old Prisoner. The Old Prisoner saw visions of his ascension, which is why he needs the sacred glands in order to ascend. It doesn't seem like this is the first time he's tried this though, as from the inscriptions it states, the Old Prisoner sits contentedly atop his perch, awaiting the newest. The unborn must be greeted with gifts, but gifts they will bestow in return for unwavering loyalty. Another etching talks about the Dark One, which as we know is another name for the Dark Father, a name that the Old Prisoner is also called. It talks about how people have moved into temples with tall monuments built by devoted hands. That's why the way for him to ascend is the only way. Every group within the game believes in some different revered god and has different rituals, but since the Old Prisoner won't believe these false truths, he has to take matters into his own hands and get the glands for himself. This then gives the foundling a purpose, help the prisoner by retrieving the glands and allow him to ascend. These glands are the knotted, the inflamed, and the crystalline glands, and they can be found in the 3 areas of the game and are guarded by 3 individuals who are the revered of their respective locations. In the Shrine of Ash, since Imrod the Repentant, hiding below the shifting archives in the Seat of Infinity is Cruxus the Twiceborn, and deep within the bottom of the crypt lying dormant is Tarsus the First Martyr. Within the Shrine of Ash, it's clear this place has different ideologies than the Sesters and Brothers of the Order, as in the inscriptions and etchings we find within the area, there are talks of immolation as well as hate towards the Order, claiming how they seek a utopia which doesn't exist, and are charmed and distracted because of the nectar they drink, which as we know is told to bring people closer to the revered gods, but also cause hallucinations. The Shrine of Ash has 3 areas we can explore: the Temple Grounds, the Monument of Ash, and the Sanctum of Flame. This place used to be a temple of sorts, while also housing a large forge used by many who were handy enough to work it, such as the Arch-Engineer and the Metallurgist. Acolytes and heralds of all kinds fill the hall, and they aren't really keen to outsiders. You'll notice a running theme within this game, that every area has different enemies. Some do have similar looks and attacks, but are very different in their design. This proves that these people worship the revered that sit within the areas they reside. In this instance, all the acolytes and heralds of Ash worship Imrod the Repentant in the immolation ritual, as he is the revered of this location. These acolytes and heralds are described to us by Sester Genessa as gruesome, mostly just decaying flesh and bone packed with sacred ashes. She also says how she doesn't miss the impurities of flesh, as another hint she's immortal, while also explaining how she used to compare herself to these acolytes within the Shrine of Ash, individuals who just want to be one with their god just as she wanted, but hopes we don't become like them and found amongst the burnt ash of the flame. These individuals of the Shrine of Ash do a ritual called immolation, which is self-sacrifice, and they use the Sanctum of the Flame to do so, a large pit filled with lava, once used by the Forge Masters, now used for sacrificial offerings and spiritual connection. Upon drinking the nectar, we collapse and awake in a realm home to Imrod. The area is covered in sand, dust, and dead bodies. It's clear who these bodies are, but they seem close to some of the brigands of Fallgrim, as well as some of the acolytes of Ignis, judging from the armor. So either Imrod is killing those who are the outsiders of the Shrine of Ash, or he's purging the weak individuals that perform the ritual to become closer to him, but to him are unworthy. He also uses the strength of his flame abilities to burn others' souls for his own gain, and then throws them away like trash as he sees them as unworthy. We then receive the inflamed gland, and a glimpse of annihilation, both items containing warm temperatures and feelings of anguish, as screams can be heard within the core of the glimpse itself. Within the faces inside it, more and more looking like ash and smoke and less like people. This then leads to the mysterious circumstance whenever the Foundling holds a sacred gland. Everyone is on high alert, and all the enemies within Fallgrim are replaced with Noctisurpers who constantly hunt the Foundling. This is like with Hattern, another one of these game mysteries with no explanation. These glands hold the most purest form of true nectar. If you wanted the top of the line in terms of tar and nectar, this is it, which is why the people these are bestowed upon are considered gods. They contain these glands within them. It's said that each drop contains transcendence and transfigurement, which is existence beyond the physical realm, and the ability to change one's appearance respectively. This is why we go to new areas when sipping this nectar. We're transcending into different physical planes of existence. Sester Genessa can no longer help us with the extraction of this gland, as it's basically above her ability to handle. Those of pious hands, or blasphemous hands in our case, can achieve this ability of extraction like the old prisoner, as he is the only one we can give these glands to. Upon arriving, we meet a new person, Thestus. He mentions how we brought the fog with us. He says this regardless if we hold a gland or not, so I'm assuming this is tied to glimpses. This is what he summons the fog with and gets rid of it. Thestus also points out how we have revered fluids, talking about the gland that we have with us, but we aren't anointed, so how did we get it? He also states that we stink of violence, but good riddance to those revered individuals because they spread sickness wherever they go, so he'd rather they rot away and die. You bring him glimpses, and he will bring back the fog. While this is more gameplay oriented, this does give us a bit more insight into those creatures that come out during the fog. According to Thestus, these creatures don't hunt for coin or food. They only hunt for glimpses, so they can feel that raw emotion once more. Thestus also indulges in this practice of hunting glimpses for that raw emotion as well. I think it'd be a good time to explain glimpses, as they aren't really explained too well, but they come in a variety of sizes and forms, all with different reasons for existing. Glimpses, in their most basic form of explanation, is a memory. The glimpse of wisdom bestows the owner with memories and lost insights, while the glimpse of affection fills the bearer with warm passion. But the biggest question is, how did these even exist? If I die right now, will I drop a glimpse? Can someone take my glimpses? Can I give people my glimpses? And if I find a glimpse of wisdom, for example, which shows the memories and insights of someone, are these my old memories, or the person I took them from's memories? These will have to remain unanswered, as there isn't enough evidence to come up with an indisputable answer, but there is a theory that I do propose to this. I think glimpses come in all shapes and sizes with all different functions, but when you find these glimpses, they relate to you. Let me elaborate. Finding a glimpse of wisdom will show you your memories and insights as it now pertains to you. Why would the Noctisurpers seek these glimpses? These creatures are completely deformed humans, unrecognizable and more savage in nature. It's unsure what caused this, but it might be obvious to speculate that nectar had something to do with this. Regardless, they aren't human anymore, completely changed, so they would want these glimpses to relive these memories and warm feelings they felt when they were alive, so to speak. This is the only explanation that I can come up with at the moment, and hopefully it's pretty close to the right idea. I've never been a big fan of adding theory to a lore video where it should be all facts and explanation, but sometimes things aren't explained, so theorizing is the only solution. The only thing left to do to progress once you have the Gland, though, is to bring it to the old prisoner. He talks about how the Glands are vessels of the divine, and how the devout only waste them by not using its fullest potential. He also instructs us to visit the 2 remaining locations. One of these 2 is the Crypt of Martyr. This is where the dead are left to rot and stay imprisoned within the catacombs. The enemies within the catacomb ended up dragging a Grisha down into the depths and are considered a slave and a guardian forced to sit in an ice cavern enshrined in ice as the disciples pray. But he is also considered a guardian, like I said, but he's guarding the Immaculate. As the Shrine of Ash was about sacrificing oneself to be closer to the god they pray to, the crypt and its followers guard the Immaculate with their life, waiting for the ascension of everyone who is enshrined within the ice and the Immaculate herself to rise. Only then will they discover the true spiritual connection. You must kneel before the Immaculate and place your palm on the deathless doctrine provided, then surrender your pride, vanity, and will. This allows the Immaculate to guide you with her eternal wisdom, untouched and unspoiled. Your spirit will not falter if it is hers to command. A note written by someone enshrined in ice now states that their first vision was like a dream. This person was in a vast chamber where he found himself a maiden crowned in winter glass. She placed her hands around his throat and sent him back to reality, but the icy presence still remained, linking the 2 forever. This is most likely a man talking about his experience with the Immaculate for the first time. But people doubted the religion and its beliefs, which led to the first martyr, Thestus. The first martyr didn't give up his blood or body. He gave up his own living memory, sealed within the ice to preserve the faith of the Immaculate. While the Immaculate is the leader of this religious group, it's the martyr who sacrificed himself so that others can prosper, which is why he's constantly revered by the people within the crypt. Eredrim also signed his name with the Deathless Doctrine. He wanted to be enshrined along with others because Eredrim was tired of war and almost scarred by it and wanted to believe in something that could stop it.
The Ovats made promises of an end to war and human suffering. Promises all were desperate to hear, myself not least, for I'd seen my share of tragedy. I scratched my name in their book, swearing myself to the Deathless Doctrine. They say that beyond the ice, the old world is preserved. No war, no famine, no suffering. Eternal peace, shielded by their unwavering sovereignty. A lineage that spans centuries. Why should I not be counted among the privileged?
Eredrim also constantly talks about how the weak and unwilling should not be enshrined, as they don't deserve it, and that he has proved himself worthy.
Sacred rites remain closed to me. I'm unworthy of the venerated nectar. But I will prove myself. These sniveling rats who bow and scrape will never be enshrined. They have neither the will nor the strength to accept the Deathless Doctrine.
As stated before, though, the beginning of the crypt contains the dead and unwanted, with the occasional enslaved disciple there to pray and watch over the guardian. But the crypt goes deeper, as we know. It leads to a sanctum and a large altar room, where we meet more people who are waiting for the ascension of the Immaculate. The sanctum used to be a large place of worship until all the faithful had left. The hall had tons of banquets and feasts in honor of their forefather, but he grew distant and eventually became unwelcome. So now the visitors are greeted with suspicion and scorn like we receive. But guarding the Immaculate, as we know, is the first martyr. He sits inside her, defending her. This altar is resonating with the Immaculate's presence. Her eternal winter she possesses preserves the martyrs so that they can serve even in death. The flesh of the martyrs is put into scriptures of sacred text and passed around the faithful followers. Just like the last time, you sip the nectar and fight the being on the other side, this being the first martyr, Thestus. Upon killing Thestus, you rip out the gland from his body and are given a glimpse of insignificance in the crystalline gland. A cold-looking gland, showing nothing but cold, bright light, said to make the bearer remember past enthusiastic memories. The glimpse is a confusing one, though, however. No matter how long someone searches into the glimpse, they never find their reflection on the surface. Since glimpses are looking at memories, this could be interpreted as the future is uncertain, so it can't exactly display what hasn't happened or isn't 100% possible to happen, as it's the future. With the past, it's already been made. These things happen and things didn't happen, so showing the past is easy. And that's what glimpses do. Showing the future isn't as easy as anything can change the future. Taking this back to the old prisoner, we now have the only place left, the Seat of Infinity. The Seat of Infinity is where the brothers and sisters of the Order reside. Probably the weirdest place of the three, wherein the other two have actual structures with supports and some natural elements flowing in with them. This place is large, open, and floating in some parts. On a secret path to the area itself, underneath the stairs, is a corrupted Sester, represented by wearing a red mask. Going off the fact that she is named Corrupted Sester and is wearing a red mask to signify that, I'm assuming this was intentional and she was outcasted by the Order. Her inventory has some forbidden merchandise, forbidden offerings, effigies, and tainted nectar, and I would like to take more time with the forbidden offering since this is the only one in the game. You only need one of these items to complete the upgrade, and she's the only one that has it. The forbidden offering says, quote, "A perverse offering to the tarnished seals. The rite of transfiguration remains forbidden, but its practice is not completely forgotten. The promise of revelation carried a high price for those who glimpsed the unknowable. Such followers became forsaken creatures, fit only to be locked away." My theory is since she is carrying this offering means she attempted to complete a ritual or had already completed one, and once the other members of the Order caught wind of it, she was exiled out and left to fend for herself. A Sester without any powers who was just exiled out cannot defend herself against the creatures of Fallgrim, so she chose to hide under the Seat of Infinity stairs as to be safe and hopefully not caught by the others, as not too far from the area there is a group of brigands with swords and crossbows. Many come here to the Seat of Infinity looking for answers, but will find nothing but silence. To be reborn, a child of the many, a Sester or brother in this case, you must throw yourself into the chasm and let the void beneath take and remake you, those of which who do become the Sesters and brothers, but they are emptied, no longer remembering their name, just to be repoured into some human-like vessel, not confined to shape or time. They are a being within a body, but time doesn't end when the body does. Their spirit continues to move on. The Seat of Infinity and their Order is a strange one, using nectar in their rituals and having members drink it until they're mad, but that doesn't seem to bother them, as nectar is the one way to feel connected with their god. Many of the scholars within the Order went mad, writing all kinds of gibberish within the books of the Shifting Archives thanks to this. Sester Genessa talks about how we may regret trespassing here, not only because of her fellow Sesters and brothers, but they're twins. This might be a reference to the plethora of armed guards in this place. We know that the brothers and sisters look a lot like your typical priest or scholar, with some slight modifications, thanks to us being able to see the models of Sester Genessa, her corrupted Sester, and brother Corvid. They seem like typical religious figures. The others don't. The Sublime Sester, Sester of the Order, Brother of Synod, Sublime Brother, and the Faceless Cleric don't seem like typical religious figures. In fact, the Sublime Brother is very close to the Blazing Herald, and the Brother of Synod being close to the Acolyte of Ignis, which are warriors within the Shrines of Ash. Now, the way that the map operates in this game, the Shrine of Ash is near the Seat of Infinity, so it may not be far-fetched to assume that maybe some have crossed over and joined different religious groups based on beliefs. But I want to go back to that mirror and twin statement Genessa made. Her statement says, "Just as every flame casts a shadow, so too does the spirit, and here they manifest." This talks about how even in light, darkness still remains. No one is truly good in the world. So I think these armed guards with their dark nature is a manifestation of the dark side of the Order. To put it simply, you have your light, which is your typical members of the Order, but within every member is a dark past or obsession, and in here that manifests into physical people, these guards. Within the Seat of Infinity, nothing is certain. This is obvious by the crumbling world that we see throughout the place. And the members here don't mind these inconsistencies of the world, but more embrace them as a curious blessing from the revered, and they also mention how they worship those who are twisted and reborn. The Shifting Archives within the Seat of Infinity is a large library filled with tons of written scripture, theory, and ideologies. Members sit here and would try to catalog the contents of the library, but it was found unsuccessful. These members would search for a revelation even as they are shrouded by madness. The sacred tablets once looked upon by the scholars now collect dust. Individuals blinded by the unfathomable knowledge would be able to inscribe its mysteries with hammer and chisel. These servants still remain, but have no more insight anymore. as they are now just faceless guardians, leaving the library unattended and unused. All that's left is Twiceborn Crucix. The Twiceborn, unlike other revered beings, requires no pledges. The reward for loyalty is enslavement, which may describe the committed devotion these members have. The Twiceborn drops the glimpse of oblivion and the knotted gland from his body. The bearer of the glimpse is filled with a sense of emptiness. Their surroundings turn into a muted, joyless world. Their mind slows and their limbs grow heavy, while the knotted gland is a gland that beats irregularly, almost as if there were two hearts in it. This is the final gland we need. We rip out the gland out of the head's tongue, almost as if the head was the spirit or soul of the Twiceborn. Taking it back to the old prisoner, he calls us naive, going through all this hardship for one person when only he will ascend, not us, and says that we should be honored to be able to see the ascension of another being. The old prisoner says that we are just an empty shell with only instinct and flesh, left without purpose, led by false idols, and that if even for an instant he will let us bask in the truth and to witness his ascension. Furthermore, he rambles on how this is what it must feel like to be picked among the many to rule over the lesser souls, how fate favors those who act and not those who sit there with no purpose, and that the maggots of this place bow and scrape before their gods while their lives unravel thread by thread in a pile of utter meaninglessness. With the sacred glands in hand, he leaves and goes down the hole. When we follow him, we get to see his true form. But there's a problem. Everything was wrong. He had visions of ascending into a new life, but now it's all just darkness and shallow water. These visions weren't of him, but of us and our ascension. He's questioning why we should be allowed to leave, but the rest remain stuck in Fallgrim, calling this unjust. Now his goals have changed. Now that he can't descend, he won't let anyone else ascend. Sester Genessa brings up to us that when we take the Twiceborn gland, how us taking these glands was almost like we were destined to, almost as if it was fate, and then also tells us to not overindulge. She mentions how a heretic she once knew was greedy and drank too much of the true nectar that didn't belong to him, and how he turned into a different being entirely, very different from a human, and how that this was his reward for his greediness. I can't help but wonder if this person she mentions is the old prisoner. The old prisoner has always seemed very greedy, constantly wanting everything and for everything to go his way, and when it doesn't, he gets other people to do his bidding for him. The old prisoner stated to us before that he also once knew Sester Genessa. This story of a man she once knew becoming too greedy and turning into a beast could very well be the old prisoner, and what we see is that beast he turned into. Upon his defeat as the Foundling, we retrieve and extract the Dark Father's gland. This gland allows the player to ascend. Upon accepting, the Foundling throws the gland and basks in the true nectar, removing his shell and leaving the mortal plane. Once the credits roll, we are back at the tower. Sester Genessa welcomes us with her usual greeting, except something's off. We ascended, yet why are we back in the tower? That's the burden of immortality. Just like her being able to live on forever, she is cursed to observe and watch every day of her life, whereas we get to live on forever as well, except we continue to do what we were already doing forever, or as she put it, toil without end. But she says not to worry, as there is some comfort and even some pleasure in ritual, then continues to go back to her normal self and offers us a sip. This is the ending of Mortal Shell. Ascending past the mortal plane, being reborn and becoming immortal like Sester Genessa, but also like her, bound to stay and struggle without end, as our spirit is separated by the profane eternities that exist, giving us one foot in the other world beyond the mortal plane, but not fully removed from the plane from whence we came, as that is the curse of immortality. Our body, like Sester Genessa, is just a vessel now, whereas we stated when discussing the Order, our spirit will live on past the age of our body, as now we are just immortal. The body is just a vessel for us to pour ourselves into, unused until we see fit, kind of like how we've been using the shells throughout our journey. Bodies we inhabit until we discard them in replace of another or to show our true form. That's the ending of Mortal Shell. Before we head out though, I know this is a lot of information, so I wanted to summarize what we've gone through. It won't be as detailed, but if you want to get the absolute bare minimum understanding of what's going on with the game, then here it is. We as the Foundling, someone with no purpose at the moment of our arrival, meet a prisoner who gives us that purpose. He asks us for a favor, which is to help us retrieve these sacred glands so that they can heal him. You as the Foundling go to 3 areas: the Shrine of Ash, the Crypt of Martyr, and the Seat of Infinity, battling your way through to meet the end bosses who possess the sacred glands. These are the founders of each of the group's religious beliefs. In all the areas, everyone has some sort of religious belief, but they're all different, and each god they believe in is also different, with the end goal of having some sort of spiritual connection with their god in whatever way they believe. The Shrine of Ash, whose god is Imrod, believes in self-sacrifice by fire to feel a stronger bond between them and the god. The Crypt of Martyr worshippers enshrine themselves in ice so that they can be reborn when the god, the Immaculate, arrives. And the Seed of Infinity houses the brothers and sisters of the Order, who use tar, a substance said to be part of the gods, in their rituals. They also end up consuming the tar, which causes them to see visions of their god, making them feel a stronger bond between the two. Once collecting all of them, the old prisoner uses them to try to ascend himself, but finds out that the visions he have been seeing aren't of his ascension, but you, the players. With this knowledge in hand, he is angry and attempts to kill you. Once the player defeats him, they themselves can ascend, but as we have discovered, immortality isn't all that nice. If anything, it's just a curse. That is Mortal Shell. Now we get to the outro of sorts, a time where I don't have to ramble about lore, ideologies, and theory, a more carefree section of the video. Let me know how you enjoyed the Mortal Shell story. It's definitely a complicated one, filled with subtext, red herrings that were hard to dig through, but in the end I think I came up with a decent explanation on the game. For those who are wondering, if you choose not to ascend, you actually get sent back to the tower like nothing ever happened, and if you do go back into the hole, the Unchained is alive again, as we technically didn't kill him by grabbing his gland, so he is still alive. A very truly unexpected and terrifying experience. Stay tuned in the future, as I plan to cover the stories of the shells within the game next, as they are just as rich in story as the game itself and need to be shared. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you like the commentary, like the video, subscribe for future videos coming soon, and goodbye.